Watch out, Paul, old chum. King Tut's men are going to throw you in a pot of boiling oil.
Don't worry, Tim. This isn't oil. It's Aunt Hilda's witch's brew.
Well, it is the same cauldron, but I'd still better pull you out before he pops up.
Who? Oh, holy hand puppets. Mortimer.
To the bat poles. Welcome to the Bat Poles, a show so poorly animated that you can only hear it. This is Tim in Tokyo with my brother Paul in Hanover, New Hampshire.
Not bad, Tim, not bad.
Our theme version this time was by the Dynamic Duo from 1988. The Dynamic Duo is an alias for the British band Alien Sex Fiend. And as the Dynamic Duo, they released this one-off 12-inch single with several tracks, or kind of an EP, I guess. The other tracks are also ostensibly the theme, but they're really just kind of dance mix noodling that doesn't necessarily have a melody. But yeah, the Alien Sex Fiend was more of a goth band, so this was really like outside of their usual style, so I can see why they went by a different name for this record. This is more of a synth pop thing, which I listened to one of their other songs, like actual Alien Sex Fiend songs on YouTube. It's very, very different from this.
Mm-hmm. So if the band went by its own name, it would effectively become false advertising.
Right. They were from Earth and not interested in sex at all.
Earthling prudes.
This version is called the Utility Bop for some reason or another. And I found it on the YouTube channel 12-inch 45s, uploaded April 9th, 2011. Incidentally, it turns out that Alien Sex Fiend formed in 1982 at a place called the Batcave Club. So I guess Batman was kind of always in the background for this band.
I guess so.
Also, interesting that this theme version came out in 1988, because we were just talking last time about how there were at least 2 Batman cast reunions on TV talk shows in 88, and we were wondering why there was this pre-Batman 89 Batmania. But we got some comment on that on the message board, so in the Bat inbox, we'll get to that.
Okay.
The Adventures of Batman with Robin Boy Wonder. Batman and Robin, dynamic duo against crime and corruption, whose real identities as millionaire philanthropist Bruce Wayne and his young ward Dick Grayson are known only to Alfred, the faithful butler.
This time we're talking about The Adventures of Batman, originally seen on Saturday mornings in 1968 to 69 as part of the Batman-Superman Hour, which was 10:30 to 11:30 Eastern Time on CBS, starting September 14th of 68. According to the daytime TV schedules on Wikipedia, the following season they divided Batman and Superman into separate shows, with Superman on Saturday morning and Batman on Sunday morning. Because in those days, there was such a thing as network Sunday morning cartoons. I mean, they'd put out I know Spider-Man was on Sunday morning at some point, like when it was in reruns, but it was on the network still, like in 69 or so, I think.
I guess for the Jewish and atheist kids?
I guess. But the separation of Batman and Superman makes kind of a tangled mess in terms of the online listings. If you look at The Adventures of Batman on IMDb, it gives that title, but the episode titles include all the Superman stories, and the cast includes all the Superman cast. So it's weird.
Well, and it also makes it really difficult, apparently, to put the cartoons themselves. That is, the 2-part episodes, which ran about like 7 minutes apiece, I guess. And then, like what we're watching on the DVD set is 3 cartoons per episode. So there's like part 1 of something, part 2 of something, and then a standalone, each of them about 7 minutes. Mm-hmm. But how they were packaged together when actually broadcast is anybody's guess, because the DVD doesn't match up to the way that individual cartoons are grouped together on IMDb.
Yeah, on IMDb, on Wikipedia, too. I mean, I don't know why all of the listings have this other order and other pairings of 2-part episodes and 1-part episodes. If anybody out there knows, please let us know, because I tried to do some research on that and I came up empty. Mm-hmm. But apparently this show did go out in syndication, although it was only 17 episodes, so I guess they would have shown it weekly if somebody was showing it in syndication. And I guess after we became adults, it was shown on some cable channel or another. But I'd never seen these before.
No, I hadn't either. I barely knew of their existence until 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, same here. And when we were growing up, as far as we knew, these were never available to us. Other than in first run when I was 3 years old and you were a baby. But I don't think I was aware of it at the time. In fact, checking those Wikipedia daytime TV listings, I know I was watching the Banana Splits at that time.
Well, Tim, you know how when I was a baby I cried a lot? I was crying because I couldn't see the Adventures of Batman, obviously.
Of course.
Shut off Banana Splits, you jerk.
And some extra background that I think I'm going to set aside for the outtakes on Patreon. To hear the outtakes, join us for $2 a month at patreon.com/deconcomics. So this episode of To the Bat Polls is going to be a general overview of the series and our thoughts after watching the whole thing. The Batcave podcast did do an episode-by-episode look at this show back in 2017. So if you want to hear each episode talked through, then you might want to look those up. This was the first animated version of Batman ever, apparently. Mm-hmm. And the previous season, there had been a Superman Aquaman hour of adventure. And Wikipedia says that Filmation was getting ready to make a pilot for a Metamorpho cartoon.
Yes, I saw that too.
But then CBS got the animation rights to Batman kind of at the 11th hour. And Filmation had to drag in as many animators as possible to slap this thing together. And we can talk about the resulting quality of the animation. It makes 70s Hanna-Barbera cartoons look like Disney's Fantasia.
A little bit. Now, I know some people of, our age or, a little younger or a little older get really nostalgic for, like, seriously limited animation of the 60s and 70s. But, I don't remember how it struck me at the time. But these days, it strikes me as just really... It's a chore to watch sometimes, particularly when, like, Bruce is, standing supposedly in front of a window at stately Wayne Manor, and there's a low angle kind of, on him and showing buildings and the bat signal behind him. But they're in Wayne Manor.
I missed that one.
They basically pasted together, put the overlay of the individual animated figure on top of a stock background for just, so that somebody would do a voiceover. Look, the bat signal. It only lasts a few seconds, but things like that. I know it was cheap. I know they had to do it very quickly, but the animation is limited, not just in terms of how fully the arms and legs and mouths of the heads of the characters are animated, but it's limited in imagination too. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, there are a lot of bits of animation that get reused many times, I notice. They've got these bits of Batman and Robin punching toward the camera.
Yes.
Those are used a lot. The ones where they're running towards the camera and the camera zooms in on the insignias on their chests.
Yes, and boy, that is some lame-looking running. It looks like they're either in a potato sack race or they each gained 400 pounds and can't move.
Yeah, the running looks like jogging for exercise. In the opening credits, you see Batman running after Joker, but it's like they're out for a jog.
Another repeated shot, and of course this is, stock and trade of limited animation. Another stock and trade being the opening, just having Alfred's head completely still, and then suddenly his mouth opens as if he's smiling for no particular reason. Yes, is he chewing something? Is he making other kitty face, like when cats suddenly open their mouths because they smell something bad? I don't know, but anyway, another repeated bit or a repeated sequence is the Robin throwing the Batarang toward the camera. That shows up,
and it always has to have
frequently.
the sound.
And there are others too, but we'll certainly talk about them.
And then, of course, the occasional bit where somebody's chest insignia is missing, or
the colors are inverted.
Inverted. I listened to the first Batcave episode about this show, and they were talking about how there, here and there, you see Robin's R is backwards. I never noticed that, but
I did notice that. I think it jumps to from one side of his chest to the other from time to time. I expect that they were in such a hurry they sometimes just had to flip the image to make a character's point in the other direction to fit with the way the frame was arranged.
Yeah, I can imagine needing that shortcut just to get the job done.
But sometimes, at least once, there's just an R with no circle around it. So he gets the Batman tree. And I have to wonder about that. Is that just like an in-betweener or an ink and paint person who didn't recognize or didn't know what the model looked like, or what happened? But it's impossible to tell.
There was at least one point where Batman had no chest insignia.
Yes.
Which is something I remember happening on Super Friends, too, in the 70s.
And the inversion of Robin's, the yellow R and the black background as well.
So my memory as a kid is that Hanna-Barbera's animation was at least better than this, but I might be misremembering.
Well, I think it was at least I don't know. I mean, Filmation got better in the 1970s. I have seen a couple of episodes, and I'm not a diehard about this, but I do like what I saw of the Star Trek cartoon, which was supposed to be a kind of fourth season. It's
it's considered canon.
Roddenberry had the Star Trek II show ready to go, and when that was not picked up, some of those scripts, which were written by the likes of DC Fontana and other sci-fi authors who wrote for the original series, ended up being made into cartoons with the voices of the original cast. And that animation is limited but not bad. I would say you're probably right that Hanna-Barbera is higher quality, or at least when they cheated, they had a very systematic way of cheating, what do they call them? Walk loops. When background goes behind the characters as they are walking, taking the same steps and making the same motions each step they take. Those things were more systematic, I think, just to, instead of just still images like they often are on this show.
So, of course, when this came on, the 66 series had just gone off 6 months before. And I suspect there was a strike while the iron is hot mentality. The kids still want to watch Batman, so let's churn this out so they can watch Batman.
Right. So how did the show come about, aside from, do we have anything more concrete than that possibility?
Well, I mean, Wikipedia did say that that they got the rights to Batman animation, and they got it kind of late, and that was why the rush.
And so they ditched the Metamorpho idea, because who's Metamorpho, to most kids?
Yeah.
Even the kids who read comics are not, it's not a character one would be as aware of as Superman or Batman. So
now I was a little puzzled by, so it says it's from Filmation in association with Duchovny Productions. Executive producer Alan Duchovny. I was trying to figure out who he was, and I couldn't get a lot of information. He did a couple live action shows in the 50s, including Tom Corbett's Space Cadet, which is the source of the term Space Cadet. But then there, in IMDb has a gap then before The New Adventures of Superman in 66. So I don't know where this Duchovny Productions came from. I gathered that I guess Filmation maybe hired it out to this other, they were like a contractor or something.
that's what I was wondering. They weren't a studio per se so much as, kind of like special effects companies now are largely outside of studios, except for Disney, let's say. But Disney still uses, Disney has ILM now. They have, because the Star Wars and Disney universes have merged corporately and otherwise. But, today, ever since Industrial Light and Magic came about, and even before that, special effects concerns are contractors almost always. None of the major studios have their own in-house effects shops anymore. So this strikes me as that sort of thing where Filmation got its name all over this thing, but they were they were basically the consultants, to the producer.
Paul pointed out to me later that he meant to say contractor, not consultant. So let's talk about the cast. Now, I finally learned how to pronounce the name of the voice actor doing Batman. On the Batcave podcast, John S. Drew said he had been listening to old radio Dragnet episodes, which this actor was a regular on. And John said the name is pronounced Olan Soule.
Okay.
And I'd been pronouncing it Olan Soul all this time, but...
Yes, I had too, at least in my head. I'm not sure I'd ever said it aloud when you sent me the pronunciation.
So Soule did Batman and Alfred. Casey Kasem as Robin, Chief O'Hara, and various other voices. And man, I can always tell when it's Casey. He can disguise his voice any different way, but it always sounds like Casey. That's Casey.
It's true. There are times that he disguises it quite well, and it takes you a second, or at least it took me a second. But various goons, for example. But there's something about the ends of his sentences, or the ends of words that he just can't disguise, like, some kind of burr or something.
I couldn't put my finger on why it was that I always picked him out, but...
Yeah, if I knew more about, how you talk about, oral noises, the words that one uses to describe these things, maybe we could come up with some kind of solution. But, suffice it to say, it's kind of uncanny how much he sounds like Burt Ward when he's really trying.
Ted Knight as the narrator, as Commissioner Gordon, as many of the villains, and Jane Webb as Batgirl and Catwoman. In the closing credits, there are 10 voice actors listed, but I figured out that 5 of them only worked on the Superman show. So not only did IMDb get it mixed up, but the people who made those closing credits in '68 didn't get it kind of sorted out.
Yeah, that's right. I believe Bud Collyer is always the first person on the list.
Yeah, he was Superman. So basically, it seems to just be the 4 that I mentioned. Plus, there's a guy in the credits named Cliff Owens, who was also known as Ray Owens. And on IMDb, he was credited with additional voices. So I couldn't tell, on which superhero he was doing additional voices. Possibly both. I don't know. Now, if you look at IMDb or Wikipedia, you'll see Larry Storch credited as voicing the Joker. But he's not listed in the closing credits of the show itself. And I found that the idea that he worked on this cartoon at all is strongly disputed. On 13thdimension.com in 2022, Dan Greenfield posted about the then upcoming release of the Blu-ray edition of this show. And he quoted the news release as saying Larry Storch voices the Joker. In the comments, someone named Joe S. Hill disputed this, and Greenfield then agreed with him, and he modified the original post to reflect that, where he says it's one of those persistent myths that just won't die. What Hill wrote in the comments, I put in my notes. The Joker was voiced by Ted Knight, not Larry Storch. I fail to see how people can't tell the difference in the voice patterns of the two actors, because Larry Storch has his own peculiar voice pattern, and Ted Knight's voiceover is absolutely unmistakable. And Storch didn't start voicing cartoons with Filmation Associates until 1970, with the debut of CBS's Sabrina and the Groovy Ghoulies. There's something I watched. And Hal Sutherland's son, Keith Sutherland, can also verify this fact. So somebody is in total error here. Just for the heck of it, let's do a voice comparison. You'll hear Ted Knight as Ted Baxter on The Mary Tyler Moore Show, then the Joker from this cartoon, Larry Storch on F Troop, and then Storch as Drac on the Groovy Ghoulies.
And now continuing with the news, local pig farmers served notice today that rising corn prices are forcing them to find other means to feed their stock.
And now, friends, we prepare for the final phase of my plan. To shatter Robin's confidence and render him useless to Batman.
I only regret that I have but one vote to give to my city. Sarge, you know anybody who wants to buy a vote?
You show me a ghost at a rock and roll concert, and I'll show you the Phantom of the Uproar.
So yeah, it's weird. I don't know where that idea came from. I'm imagining from our experience in doing this podcast, I can just imagine somebody being interviewed decades later with a fuzzy memory saying, I think Larry Storch played the Joker, and then it just becomes like accepted fact by everybody, like the fourth season myth.
Yes, even IMDb claims.
Yeah, and IMDb doesn't even say uncredited because he's not in the closing credits. You'd think that if they thought that he really did voice the Joker, they'd have to say uncredited, but nope.
It's true, there are moments where one might think that it's not Knight who's doing the voice of Joker. Like one of the late episodes with Joker struck me. It sounded as though rather than playing the Joker with the hysterical laugh and the kind of happy-go-lucky sounding voice, / evil voice, even when he's kind of at the bottom of the barrel. When he's losing, there are times when he sounds like a gangster, like he slurs his words and leaves the G's off of ing words. It sounds much more like a tough, a kind of stereotypical goon, and I couldn't quite figure that out. I wondered if it was a different voice, but. If you listen really hard, it's always Ted Knight. And just listening to his voice as announcer and as other characters, like his Riddler, is not Frank Gorshin's Riddler, but boy, is it weird and kind of interesting.
Yeah, he keeps pausing mid-sentence.
I don't like this. It's like listening to, Yogi Bear as a supervillain. Hey, boo-boo, I got a picnic basket, and I'm gonna steal it.
There's a fortune in plutonium stored here. Don't overlook a single drop. Didn't you overlook something, Riddler? The caped crime fighters. Riddle them with your fist.
Hi, I'm Sophie, and I haven't seen a lot of movies.
Hi, I'm Paul, and I'm here to help with that.
And we are SP Film Viewers.
Each week, we take a deep dive into films that Sophie is seeing for the first time, some of which are deemed classics, some of which are my favourites, and some are just to try and get a reaction from her.
We don't take ourselves too seriously, but we have a lot of fun talking about what we've watched.
and we hope you have fun listening to our light-hearted thoughts and ramblings on this cinematic journey.
So tune in every Thursday on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts from.
Sawate. My name is Stella, and I am the host of Backroll to Oracle, the Barbara Gordon podcast. Backroll to Oracle is a podcast dedicated to Barbara Gordon, the first woman to hold the mantle of Backroll for an extended period of time, roughly 1967 to 1988. The goal of Backroll to Oracle is to examine the character's history from her first appearance as Batgirl and continuing through her tenure as Oracle. Each episode looks at a vintage issue of Detective Comics or Batman, as well as other books like Justice League and Freedom Fighters, and modern issues of Batgirl and Birds of Prey. I also keep track of news involving Batgirl and other members of the Bat family, and I have a revolving series of segments like Babs in the Tube, which highlights appearances of Babs in TV and film, Shipper Spotlight, which looks at a variety of comic and pop culture couples, gives their history, and determines whether they are hot or not. Reading with Stella, which could be described as an audio drama, or just me reading a book that relates to Babs or doesn't, and of course, the mainstay literature recommendation. I have been blessed to interview writers Scott Beatty and Chuck Dixon on their Backroll Year 1 work, Brian Q. Miller on his Backroll run, Dwayne Swarzynski and Christy Marks on their separate Birds of Prey work, and the creators and actors of the Backroll Spoiled, the web series. I hope to interview more creators and actors in the future. My goal, most importantly, is to make a fun, entertaining, and thoughtful show that people enjoy and from which they learn. Find the show online at thebatmanuniverse.net and iTunes, and follow the show on Facebook and Twitter at Backroll to Oracle. Thank you, and fly on, Babs lovers.
Okay, the opening and closing credits. Okay. First of all, flashing colors. Don't let any epileptic kids watch this cartoon.
I was going to say there needs to be a warning on the disc. Man, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. Ah! I remember The Simpsons watched, when they were in Japan, they watched an anime that was like, it was called something like Lightning Flash Seizure Boy or something. And, after they watch it for like 2 or 3 minutes, they're all lying on the floor, kind of, ah.
Well, that really did happen.
Yes,
with a Pokemon episode in the late 90s. There was some flashing in it, and I guess some kids did have seizures, and Pokemon kind of went away for about 6 months. That's how you apologize for things in Japan. You just disappear for 6 months, and then it came back.
Right, you withdraw until everyone forgets, or at least is willing to forgive. Yeah, the funny bit about this on The Simpsons was that the show was dedicated to that effect. The cartoon,
that was the purpose
anime they were watching. It was even named after the effect.
So in the opening credits and here and there in the show, we see Batman and Robin jump into the Batmobile from the back of the Batmobile, over the trunk. They jump in because I guess that's easier to draw than opening the doors and easier to animate.
Oh, gosh, yes, it must be. That's a good point.
And then they drive off, and they're driving down the street, and like something weird about this street. Oh, it's an endlessly long city street with no intersections. Although I noticed in the show itself, sometimes they'll show from a side view, and then there are intersections. But when we see them like from behind, it's just like the same 10 buildings going by again and again and again, and no intersections. So it's a very long, narrow street, a very long, narrow city. Gotham City is.
Yes, it's a fairly, unlike the kind of parallelogram of Paris, or the circle of Paris, it's just one really, really long line. It must be difficult to get around. Nothing round about it.
No, get along.
Yes, exactly.
So, I don't know, this whole opening just seemed awkward to me. So we see Joker, Penguin, and Riddler, and the voiceover mentions Joker and Penguin and doesn't mention Riddler at all, and then brings up Mr. Freeze.
The cool, cruel Mr. Freeze.
And whoever made up that phrase, the cool, cruel Mr. Freeze, must be really proud of themselves, because it comes up again and again and again. Although I realized that I think somebody had the idea all of the villains need to have an equivalent to calling Joker the Clown Prince of Crime.
Right, like Penguin is the pudgy purveyor of
perfidy, yes. Riddler I didn't catch, or Catwoman, but I guess, yeah, Mr. Freeze is the cool, cruel Mr. Freeze.
Yeah, I think Riddler is like the kooky criminal something, but they don't usually reuse that phrase, at least not very often.
Yeah, that wasn't pounded into my head. But actually, it's a very 66-y term that I'd completely spaced off.
The Drill Red Puzzle Factory in Gotham City, where the Prince of Puzzlers practices a new kick.
Although that's one of the ways, and we need to collect these together. I'm sure you've got them as well, got a bunch of them as well. The ways in which this show mirrors some of the stylistic turns of the Batman 66.
Oh, it's coming. It's in my notes. I'm not there yet.
But using those alliterative phrases, over and over again every time a character gets introduced is not infrequent. Or even stately Wayne Manor is used verbatim in this show, and used more than once.
And millionaire Bruce Wayne.
Millionaire philanthropist Bruce Wayne.
Well, yeah, sometimes philanthropist, but I think in the opening, it's millionaire philanthropist Bruce Wayne. But in the show itself, here and there, I heard millionaire Bruce Wayne.
You mean millionaire Bruce Wayne? Yeah, his name is actually Millionaire B. Wayne. Or MB for short.
The other thing that felt awkward about the opening was that there are breaks in the narration, and there's that point where all we can hear is the background music and Robin's thrown batarang. It just felt like nothing's happening here, kind of.
Yes, and poor Ted Knight, how many times can you be expected to say Batman and Robin in a minute's, run through of the credits?
And oh, by the way, did we mention Batman and Robin?
Yes, seriously. Batman and Robin, scourge of Gotham City's kooky criminals. Maybe that's where kooky came in.
Now, I guess I got used to it after watching all the episodes of this show, some of them more than once. But the first 10 times or so that I I watched the end credits, I was like, what is it with this theme music? So, first of all, half of the theme is drowned out by the roar of the Batmobile. You can hardly hear the music half the time.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was complaining to you a few days ago, it barely has a melody. I mean, eventually it gets to a melody. But the melody doesn't evoke superheroes to me. And I was thinking, what do I think of with this music? It sounds like music for a wacky chase scene involving circus animals. Somebody's definitely riding an elephant. And the film would be undercranked, so everybody's moving extra fast. That's what I think of with this music.
Well, I'll tell you this, it certainly doesn't have any strong melody, that's for sure, as you mentioned, but it doesn't have any strong anything. You would expect it to be kind of heroic or something, or jazzy, like the Neil Hefti theme. But doesn't have really anything to hang your hat on. I can't even remember it right now.
And then at the end, out of nowhere, the drummer goes haywire. And I thought, is this going to turn into a punk rock song? And then it had 3 more notes and it ended. Like, okay, what was up with this drum roll?
Maybe he was so excited that it was almost over that he just had one final extinction burst of energy. Oh, thank God. My 2.5 minute nightmare is over.
Okay, the writers. Now, I think the saving grace of this show is the writing, because there was some really clever stuff. I mean,
yes, I couldn't agree more.
Not all of it was top notch, but there was a lot that I enjoyed about the writing. Two of the writers did a lot of work for DC Comics. Bob Haney, who created the Teen Titans and Metamorpho, and in the 80s, when he left DC, he did some more cartoons for Rankin Bass, like Thundercats and Silverhawks and Karate Cat, which I never heard of before because I was an adult by that time. And also George Cashden, who did DC Comics from 1947 into the 70s. And he wrote for the other DC hero cartoons and also 121 episodes of The Mighty Hercules.
Gosh. Was that a Hanna-Barbera?
Didn't check that, but he must have been like the only writer for that show to write that many.
Well, sometimes IMDb lists a creator as the writer of every episode, so perhaps he helped create the show.
That could be. Also, there's Dennis Marks, who mainly wrote for TV. Lots of cartoons that he worked on from the 60s into the 90s. Just a few titles I put in my notes. Batfink, the Beatles cartoon, speaking of Beatles, Beetle Bailey, Josie and the Pussycats in Outer Space. I remember that one. The Barclays, which was sort of an All in the Family ripoff, or kind of turned into a cartoon.
Yes.
Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends in the 80s, and Transformers. And his last IMDb credit is one episode of Batman the Animated Series in 1992.
Fascinating.
So he's got a lot of Batman in his resume.
Looking up The Mighty Hercules, there's no information, at least on Wikipedia, about who created the show, but it was produced by a company called Adventure Cartoon Productions from 1966 to 1963 to 66.
Okay. Another writer is William J. Keenan, or often credited as Bill Keenan, who wrote both Saturday morning stuff like Jackson 5, Kid Power, that has some meaning in our background, and Land of the Lost, but also primetime shows like Partridge Family, $6 Million Man, Laverne and Shirley, Adam 12. Into the 80s, he was writing for both Saturday morning and primetime. The other two writers I couldn't find any information on. Bill Butler, who is apparently not the Bill Butler who was the cinematographer for Jaws.
No, almost certainly not.
And Oscar Bensall. He wrote for some other DC heroes on TV, but I couldn't find anything else about him. And I tried to find out about the music. There's very little information on that. The closing credits say background music by John Marion, who curiously is not listed on IMDb. IMDb says series music by John Gart. I don't know, maybe
yes,
John.
I noticed that too.
Maybe John Marion and John Gart are the same guy. There seems to be some changing around of names occasionally. Dennis Marks had various spellings of his name, so I'm not sure why a writer would do that, but maybe to appear to be a different person. Or it's like Patti Smith changing her name to Patti Smythe because there's already a singer named Patti Smith.
Shooting at the walls of heartache. Bang, bang. Yes, apparently John Marion Gart was his full name.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it dawned on me here that, they're both named John. Yeah, so it's the same guy.
Right. He was also an actor who appeared on shows like Robert Montgomery Presents in the 1950s. That was an anthology show.
Okay, then let's get into the episodes. Now, of course, we're not going to go through every episode and talk about the stories. We'd be here all night. But some general things I noticed here first. So, being an Adam West fanboy, as a kid watching Super Friends in the 70s, I was never really crazy about Soule as Batman, because I wanted Adam West. But watching of course, that Batman had a lot of other cast members to work with, and I think maybe he couldn't really stretch out as much as he can here, where he's the star of the show. Watching this, I really came to appreciate his Batman. He sounds both friendly and authoritative.
He does.
And he has a sense of humor that you don't see often in Adam West Batman.
Right. There are moments where Robin and Batman are kind of, playfully teasing the villain as they beat the snot out of him. And, it actually feels it feels mean, for one thing, especially when they laugh at villains who are behind bars, heartily. That bothered me a little bit. It's like, they're bad people, but...
Batcave Podcast said taunting the villains.
Exactly. And then, the frame will fade out on, Joker with this huge frown on his face, looking completely down at the dumps, like, oh, thanks a lot, Batman. Now I'm going to go hang myself in jail. But those moments are lighthearted and kind of come off fairly well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess so.
Not the moments of teasing villains or taunting them, but the moments of kind of joking around while they're beating up somebody right before the end of the episode.
Yeah. But yeah, 66 Batman didn't kick the villains in the crotch after he caught them, but this Batman kind of does.
Yeah, that's true. There is a kind of big difference where between the two, in which Adam West Batman is always written to be concerned about rehabilitation, whereas Batman and Robin in this cartoon just want to throw him behind bars and keep him there as long as possible.
Yeah, that's true. He never talks about Of course, there's not much time. I mean, when you think about it, writing one of these is like season 3 of 66 on steroids. I mean, you got even less time to deal with than you did there.
Right, and most you've got 14 minutes.
14
you've
minutes,
got one of the 2-episode or the 2-part cartoons. Yeah, and so the elimination of people like, the elimination of Aunt Harriet makes a lot of sense, but. Really, if you think about it, there's nobody in the world of the Adventures of Batman except the main characters and the goons. There's nobody else.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You hardly ever.
Maybe we saw a couple of people here and there, but certainly that gigantic long street that is Gotham City is completely empty. if not of cars, then certainly of pedestrians.
Well, yeah, occasionally there are other cars sometimes, but yeah, in the opening and closing credits, that driving away scene, there are no other cars anywhere.
No. And I think there are some other characters at parties. There are a couple of scenes with crowds.
Right, yeah, there's social events here and there, but otherwise, yeah, I mean, you hardly ever have a speaking part for somebody who isn't a main character, a villain, a henchman. And the henchmen all talk like 1930s movie crooks.
They do.
So what are these disguises gonna do for us, Riddler?
Here comes Batgirl. Get ready and let her see ya.
I mean, it's such a small cast of actors. They have to be really versatile and come up with as many different voices as they can. So they use the goofy ones for the henchmen, like, yeah, boss, like that kind of voice.
Yeah, I'm gonna call that voice the yeah boss voice for the rest of my life. So, what do you think about the Joker? What do you think about Ted Knight's characterization?
Well, yeah, I mean, the way the villains come off is just completely different from the 66 show. Both, the character designs are from the comics, and the voices are nothing like the 66 actors. I don't know. I thought it was a decent Joker. It made sense as the comic book Joker, and he has a good laugh for it, I think.
Yeah, he does. Penguin sometimes sounds more like Joker to me than Penguin, because I think his first line in the first episode on the disc set anyway was, ooh.
Yeah. It does, and he's off camera, and you think it's the Joker, and nope.
Right. Well, I was thinking, as frequently as the villains show up, and it really is like the rotating Joker, Penguin, Riddler, Joker, Penguin, Riddler. Sometimes they team up. Sometimes Catwoman gets thrown in. And there are at least two villains that seem to have been created entirely for this show, as well as the Mad Hatter, if it's from the comics. But other than that, no wonder they're eager to get these guys in jail because, in 2.5 minutes, they're going to be out again.
Yeah, and the way these are paired up, at least on the disc, I mean, maybe it happened in the other one too, but you get like the 2-parter and the 1-parter are the same villain. There's one that was all Mr. Freeze.
Oh, yeah, and the one that's all Joker as well, at least the way these are put together. Now, one thing I've got to give them credit for, the writers, that is, and, Bob Haney is probably the most respected writer of all the comics writers who worked on this show. He was the writer of The Brave and the Bold during the time that Neil Adams began drawing Batman for the first time, because Julie Schwartz apparently didn't want Adams to draw any of the main Batman titles because he thought that Adams's Batman didn't look right. It didn't apply to the model, properly. So he, tested him out on The Brave and the Bold, which was notoriously crazy. I mean, Bob Haney would come up with ways to use characters that were completely off book. He'd, bring characters back to life occasionally, I think. I mean, he just, went outside continuity, as much continuity as there was in the 60s at DC. But I liked the way that there's actually some psychology to the way the characters are thought through. Like, at least they can be pitted against each other. Like, Batman and Robin pit the villains against each other just after the villains have tried to pit Robin against Batman by, kind of running a propaganda campaign that makes it seem that Batgirl is more popular and that, they're even playing, like, they do a pirate radio station, the villains do, in which they play hit records about Batgirl and apparently make certain that Robin's, that Dick Grayson's radio is on so we can hear them at exactly that moment.
Big news! Tina Reno's come up soon, a hot new release of Batman and Batgirl song. To be sung by that new group, the Teeny Bats. More Batman and Batgirl? Don't miss tonight's special guest on the Ed Solomon Show, Batman's #1 partner in crime fighting, the fabulous Batgirl. And now, Batman's #1 partner?
But, it's at least a little off the beaten path. You don't really find in Scooby-Doo, like, episodes where the villain is trying to pit Scooby against Shaggy in order to tear apart, the culture of the Mystery Machine.
Yeah, and then they're fighting over a pizza pie.
Yeah, it's not a pizza, but a pizza pie.
Yeah, zoinks.
Jinkies. So, that struck me as at least, it's 1.5-dimensional characterization, out of a 60s Silver Age DC comic. And that was interesting. It actually rose a little bit above the 66 series, at moments like that, in terms of just imagining complex problems for the plot to solve.
How'd you like how this show goes all in on costuming the henchmen? Penguin's henchmen are like wearing these eagle costumes. Like, what the?
Yeah, it's like they're all escaped from a furry convention.
And the Joker's henchmen are all in these jester costumes.
Yeah, I bet. You want to know the truth, I bet it just makes them easier to draw because they can just draw a bunch of people who look exactly the same without having to, create any distinctions between them.
But then with Mad Hatter, they really made a lot of work for themselves because the henchmen were like all these different Alice in Wonderland characters.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yes. And they had to draw a lot of rabbits, too, for at least one scene. Yes, I'm sure they all, went home and took hot baths after, working on that for a week. Or a day. Who knows?
So what'd you think of Batgirl in this?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, for one thing, just as a side comment, really, the way that she begged off, left Daddy so that she could put on, left Commissioner Gordon so she could put on her costume, was basically what I did when I was 8 with the Vulture, when he was disguised as in one of the Spider-Man comics that I did. The Vulture is disguised as the partner in a jewelry store. And it turns out, of course, he's just going to bust out of his, nice old man costume and be the Vulture and steal all the jewels. Not a very efficient way, I think, unless he's going to embezzle. It's not a very efficient way to rip off a jewelry store. But at one point, it's in order to, as a pretext to get away from the cops when something happens and the other jeweler is questioned. Vulture says something like, "Oh my, that is bad. Can I go clean my glasses?" With Batgirl, it's, oh no, there's a huge problem that Batman has got to solve. Oh, bye, Daddy. Gotta run. Nothing suspicious about that.
No, nothing at all.
So that's not really about the character. I think she's okay. I was afraid a couple of times that it was verging on the, oh no, I've got to run in my costume Batgirl from the Silver Age comics. But for the most part, she kind of holds her own. I kind of like the fact that the villains make her the kind of villain for Robin. When Robin thinks that Batgirl is taking over his position, it puts them in a position of rivalry. I'm not crazy about it the way that Batman is often sending her home, to get out of harm's way.
Yeah, or sending her to get the police in one of them, which I thought was kind of odd because there's no bat phone in the Batmobile. You can't just call the police. You have to send somebody to go get them.
Yeah. What about bat carrier pigeons? Come on.
Carrier bats.
Thanks, Batman. At a time like this, it pays to be yourself. Won't need this anymore. Let's join Robin.
No, you go for the police while we hold these rascals here.
Oh, no. Okay, boss man.
But I thought she was okay. I thought her voice, the actor's voice as Batgirl, was certainly a lot more listenable than that same actor's voice as Catwoman. Oh,
yeah, as Catwoman, she sounds like a wicked witch.
The sleek Catmobile is parked before
Tiffany's Gem Tower, chock full of juicy jewels for the taking. And the dynamic duo can't stop us because right now they're moping at police headquarters.
Yeah, I think she's just trying to differentiate the voices, or at least that might be one of the things that's going on. But she just sounds like she's screaming all the time.
Batgirl does hold her own sometimes, but I felt like there were a few too many times where she was klutzy or had to be bailed up by Batman. Like in the Scarecrow story, she's got a bowl of the knockout gas eggs and she accidentally spills them all and they break and Batman's knocked out by knockout gas.
Here, Batman. Oh, Batman!
Ah! Thanks, Batgirl. I couldn't have done better myself.
Oh, Batman, I'm so sorry. And look what they're doing to Robin.
Right, and although
oops.
Batman, when I think Robin is really mad at her, right, and then Batman kind of talks him out of his tree.
Yeah, Batman's the calming influence a lot of the time. Cool down,
right,
chum.
Right. Yes, he's the adult in the room, and that's another thing that I like about his Batman is where he's not civic responsibility Batman, and never tells anybody to fasten their seatbelts or look both ways before they cross the street. But he's more kind of calm and self-assured about his authority.
There was exactly one episode where we got to see her actually change into Batgirl. We saw the Barbara Gordon's Bat Closet in the Jigsaw Jeopardy.
Right. Mm-hmm. Not as cool as the one on the show with the big, painted metal bolted opening that pulls open when she needs to jump in.
Speaking of civic responsibility, Batman, did you notice? So in the 9 Lives of Batman, Catwoman has made Batman and Robin glow. Some kind of radioactivity or something. I guess cancer is not a concern.
No.
And so the idea is that when they change into their other identities, she can spot them glowing and she'll know that they're Batman and Robin. And Robin says, well, then we just won't go out as Bruce and Dick. And Bruce is like, no, it's my duty to vote. There's an election tomorrow. I have to go vote. It's civic responsibility, Bruce Wayne.
Oh, that's right. That escaped me. Good catch.
I mean, that was a bit of 66 there. Just so square. He's got to vote, even if it's going to endanger his secret identity. I mean, of course, he comes up with another solution to make everybody glow to throw her off.
Right. Let's nuke the whole town. After all, it's just one really long street. Not that many people are going to be casualties.
For some reason, I really love the swooping bat scene transitions, especially the ones where the music is that wah wah. Those really appealed to me for some strange reason.
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of sleek. It's diagonal as the bat comes across the screen. And I liked that too. And I think the Filmation New Adventures of Batman may pull some of that. I felt as though I'd seen that before, but I haven't gone back to watch the New Adventures for a long time.
There was one, I forgot which episode it was in, though, where... So it was one where Robin drives in this. That's been one of our bugaboos in some of the early scripts of 66, where he didn't have his license yet and writers kept making him drive. He's driving the Batmobile, and one of those transition bats swoops in with no music and doesn't change the scene. And then 3 seconds later, then there's another swooping bat with the music and the scene change. So just an accidental bat swoop in there.
Well, or maybe it was just a little scenery, a bat actually, a diegetic bat swept past the camera just for atmosphere, maybe. I'm just kidding. I'm sure it was just a mistake.
So we see the Batplane and the Batcopter fairly regularly, but I was wondering, where are these vehicles stored? Because,
good question.
I mean, in Freeze's Frozen Vikings, the Batmobile gets frozen in ice, and Batman says, okay, we need the Batcopter. Bam, they've got the Batcopter, and they're off. It's just like he pulled it out of his pocket or something and added water, and it grew up to normal size, and they got in.
Well, those utility belts are much more capacious than they look from the outside. Well, they can fit an entire bat shield into them, just by folding it up, apparently.
So I was rewatching for the DVDs, the first episode today, and I noticed that I hadn't caught it before. There are power switches on their utility belts.
Power switches?
Yeah. It was in that How Many Herring in a Wheelbarrow. They wanted to somehow cause electricity to zap out of them. And so he said, switch off the power switch on your belt. Wow. I mean, what is up with these? Are they heated? What's up with these belts?
Robin, get one hand free. Turn power switch on belt full. Blow the fuses. Check. Ready. Now.
Yes, we use them primarily for comfort, but occasionally they can be a weapon in the cause of justice. Speaking of electricity, I just have to point out that in one of the later episodes, and I didn't write down the title, but I think it's a team-up among at least Joker, Riddler, and Penguin, and possibly Catwoman too. But nobody taught the writers anything about, electricity safety, because at one point, Batman is using like a wire to zap the villains the way that the villains were going to zap him. But I believe at the moment they're soaking wet and they're hanging from the cord, so they're not grounded. And he zaps them, and then they like run off to try to steal a car or something. It's like, dude, they're dead, Batman. You killed them. You sent that many volts and amps of electricity jolting through their bodies while they're wet and not grounded. They are deceased.
They are ex-villains.
Exactly. It is an ex-villain. Yes, don't try this at home, kids, to say the least. Okay, go ahead, please.
So I have a list of things that were either clearly taken from the 66 series or possibly coincidentally or possibly not had similar story beats.
Excellent. Okay.
Okay, so Robin has holies. Almost every episode, Robin says holy something. And, we know that was a Lorenzo Semple idea.
Yep.
Chief O'Hara appears in some of them, voiced by Casey Kasem. But, Chief O'Hara was invented for the show.
Right.
Mr. Freeze, in one of his appearances, has the warm corridor of the Sanders freeze.
And the 50 degrees below zero or lower limit from the Sanders Mr. Freeze as well.
And also in that one, it's called Mr. Freeze, there are icebergs in Gotham Harbor, and Batman does a 180-degree bat turn.
Yes, complete with parachute.
In The 9 Lives of Batman and Robin are in quicksand, and they use jet heels to get out of it. Very similar to the John Aston Riddler.
Right.
I already mentioned Millionaire Bruce Wayne and Stately Wayne Manor. Also, Riddle Me This, which I think was an invention of the 66 show.
Yes, I looked that up, and I wasn't able to find anything definitive, but I believe, that's correct. But the jury's still out.
And also calling Penguin Pengy. I think that originated with His Honor the Penguin.
And there is an episode called His Honor the Joker here among these as well. And even His Honor is spelled the same way.
We have a story where Penguin pretends to go straight and is catching villains. And of course, he's got ulterior motives. We have the phrases fine feathered finks and that oily bird. Just the fact that Mr. Freeze is called Mr. Freeze and not Mr. Zero, that's from the show.
Right. And he appears to be modeled on the Otto Preminger, Mr. Freeze, although he doesn't have a German accent. Yes, and he doesn't say Wild ever.
A bomb put in the Batmobile in The 9 Lives of Batman, out of Ma Parker. Oh, and in His Honor the Joker, Gordon and O'Hara are almost tricked into shooting Batman and Robin.
Yes, that struck me hard. But then they flip around the targets. They're behind the targets, sort of the way they are in the episode where they're at the strapped up behind the targets at the carnival.
Penguin goes straight. But then some non-66 stuff. So I already mentioned the character designs are very much from the comics. Of course, they would not have gotten likeness rights at the time. I don't think there was not even any merch with likenesses of Adam and Bert on it. It was all comics based. So Batmobile is different and completely different sound.
Yes, and it has a giant bat on the front, on top of the engine on the hood.
Batman and Robin repeatedly batapult out of the Batmobile with seemingly no thought to what to do if they miss their target.
Nor, how to put the seat back and retrieve it if it ends up getting fired 200, 300 yards away.
Well, it seemed like in some of those, the seat was ejecting them. I didn't see any seat with them. It was just them flying out of the car. Although we did see in one of them in Partners in Peril that they had batachutes on their backs. So
right.
they weren't completely throwing caution to the wind.
Sure, although they were throwing themselves to the wind. And in a way, it's not too surprising since the way that they're drawn in one of the conventional shots of them just, driving from the shot and profile from Robin's side of the Batmobile, Batman is leaning so far forward over the wheel that, if they ran over a tin can, he'd probably lose his front teeth. So maybe they just hit the brakes too hard when they want to catapult out. They don't even have to eject the seats at all.
In the episode, It Takes Two to Make a Team, the hotline rings. It doesn't beep. Completely different sound.
Batman's number one partner? Holy. Yes, Commissioner.
Also, Batman and Robin have a way to get in touch with Batgirl.
Right. Right. Almost as if there's no air between them. I mean, they seem not to, they don't seem all that concerned about each other's secret identities at all.
No. I think part of that is just, the lack of time that the writers have to do their, to get the story done. At most, like we said, 14 minutes. So it's just easier to have them have a way to get in touch with each other because you can't have like on the show where Alfred hears what Batman and Robin are talking about and then contacts Batgirl and gets her drawn in. There's no time for that.
Right. And Alfred really only has anything to do with the plot per se just a couple of times in these 17 episodes. Speaking of the resemblance to the 66 show, it doesn't resemble that show at all in the way that Alfred is used.
Also, not very much time spent in the Batcave. Here and there's a scene where they're doing some science or something there, but not very many times.
Using the Bat computer to generate answers to a question, and that happens a couple of times in the first episodes on the disc, and I liked that. It felt very 66y. But it fades pretty quickly.
Speaking of points where, like you were talking about the villains getting electrocuted and somehow surviving, a kind of gap in the story, The 9 Lives of Batman. So Robin is inside this glass tube where Catwoman has put him, and water is rising inside it. And Batman's going to throw his Batarang to break the glass. But then he sees that it's wired, and if he breaks the glass, Catwoman says, there'll be a loud boom. Okay? So he gets Robin out a different way. And then there's fire outside of the tube. So they decide to break the glass in order to put the fire out. And so they use explosive pellets. Why do you need explosive pellets? Because it's going to blow up just by breaking the glass. You don't need extra explosive.
Well, they just wanted to see it blow up real good.
So did you have any particular favorite episodes? I have a couple.
Boy, well, I think It Takes Two to Make a Team is probably my favorite just because it's the most, the plot is the most interesting. And, Robin's reaction to being, having a wedge, kind of pounded between himself and Batman by the villains so that he'll be, jealous and make a mistake. I thought that was pretty wise. I'm not sure that there's anything else about that episode that really, grabs me, but I like that well enough that it may be one of the only episodes that really sticks with me because it, answered the question, what would happen if someone tried to push them apart by, shoving another partner, potentially into Robin's place.
One of my favorites was Simon the Pie Man, the first one. Written by Dennis Marks. So it has a lot of jokes and puns in it, and mean, these cartoons would have that kind of thing, and you'd kind of go, ha, ha, ha. These are actually funny. I actually laughed at some of them. Like, there's a big mixer, because it's, this pastry theme.
Right.
And Simon says, imagine Batman finally beaten, literally as well as figuratively.
Oh, yes, of course.
And then, Batgirl is in the chocolate tank, and I think that's where she is. And Robin comes and says, we're having a little mixer out here, Batgirl.
Yes, that's right. I forgot there are some decent puns. And that was the episode that was most filled with them. But I think there were a few other, at least halfway funny jokes of that sort, told by either villains or the heroes.
And Batman and Robin are also calling Simon and his henchmen like pythons and pyromaniacs.
Yes, that's right. And they let that go. They're just like throwaway jokes, which, usually cartoons of the limited animation sort, they have to capitalize on their jokes as much as possible because, none of them are very good. So they have to make somebody seem to be laughing at them.
Holy solitaires! I'm sure those pyromaniacs will strike again. Soon. Let's go home.
Later.
Thank you, Alfred. Yes, Commissioner?
Yes, Batman. The perfidious pie men have pulled off 3 more robberies at the fairgrounds.
They stole some priceless marble busts from the Greek pavilion.
Marble cake.
Then they cracked the safe of the Graham Trust Company exhibit.
Graham crackers.
And they robbed the cashier
At the British Pavilion. Got away with £20,000.
Pound cake. We'll go to work on it immediately, Commissioner. Obviously, Dick, Simon the Pieman can't resist pastry-named prizes. To the Batcave.
The other thing about that episode that I loved, Robin is stuck in a death trap and Batman's stuck in traffic.
When the wind comes up, boy wonder, the grindstone will turn, and you will be destroyed in the flower of your youth.
I think the stone turned on my radio. Batman, help! The windmill!
pinned under grindstone. Help!
Got to think of something. But what?
While Robin is pinned down by a grindstone, the Caped Crusader is pinned down in traffic. How long can the boy wonder withstand the awful grind? In a moment, you'll see the thrilling ending. Not of Robin, we hope, but of this exciting adventure. Coming up next.
I can't believe that the 66 show never did this. Traffic jam. Batmobile stuck in a traffic jam. I was cracking up.
Wow. No, that would have been a great bit for the 66 show, wouldn't it?
I can just imagine Stanley Ralph Ross writing something like that. I can't believe it didn't occur to him.
Oh yes, and it would be just sort of like the on the Fridays late night comedy show back in the early '80s, the disaster movie called Escalator with a big exclamation mark at the end, where everybody's they're stuck on the escalator and it won't go up or down and they don't know what to do and somebody's giving birth and somebody's having a heart attack and they can't get help. It's like that feels sort of like that, that sort of moment where the traffic jam is the worst possible thing that could happen because I can't get to him.
I mean, just imagine the end of a part 1 of the 66 show. Batman stuck in traffic. Imagine the puns that you could have Desmond Doomsday say.
Oh, indeed. Indeed. Another one episode that did catch my fancy was Enter the Judge. Because, the Judge is a villain that was completely constructed, created for this show. And I just love the fact that he's like running around sentencing Batman and Robin to like jail or death but he's, basically he escaped from a penal colony, right? And grabbed the wig of the kind of British
the judge that was had to go out there every so often to kind of, I don't remember what it was, to retry him or something, but or to
pass sentences, if they were just there as a kind of holding a holding offshore prison.
Who's this guy you're checking through the Bat computer, Batman?
A notorious international criminal who's up for pardon on Satan's Island. Far too dangerous to release.
Satan's Island. the last remaining island prison in the world, which once a year is visited by a circuit judge who hears cases of prisoners coming up for pardon.
I realized it was a one-trick pony, but it actually kind of worked. They might have exhausted the premise in 7 minutes, but it was worth a try, and I thought it actually kind of was a different sort of approach to thinking about how justice gets meted out in the Batman universe.
My other favorite was A Game of Cat and Mouse by Bill Keenan. So first of all, Catwoman steals an entire castle. That was a pretty good trick.
Yeah, just with 2 helicopters?
3.
4 helicopters? Okay, well,
3.
That makes sense.
It didn't even look balanced.
And apparently no foundation whatsoever had to be worried about.
Nope. But I thought the plot was surprisingly complex for as little time as they had, because it's Catwoman and Joker are both after the same loot, and they're fighting each other. And Batman isn't even aware of Joker's involvement until halfway through the show.
Right.
So, yeah, it got pretty complex. And this is the one where Bruce claims that he wants to invest in this, whatever the loot was, Crown Jewels or something.
Crown Jewels.
And he gives her $100,000 as a down payment on them, and it's got a tracer in the money. So,
and doesn't he end up losing the money?
Yes.
It ends up getting donated.
The police recover it and put it to the policeman's fund or something. And Dick says, just goes to show you that consorting with criminals doesn't pay any more than crime itself, right, Bruce? Bruce says, so it would seem, Dick.
Yes, and he kind of half laughs, like, Yes, that was an interesting moment. It's the kind of chance on characterization that, or kind of a gamble that one wouldn't expect the writers of a 7-minute cartoon to take.
There are some other really funny points, like in Will the Real Robin Please Stand Up, where there's a double of Robin.
Right, which just happens to be blonde, so you just have to dump a bucket of black paint on him to fix him up.
Which I thought was weird, because when she sees this blonde guy without a mask, she realizes he looks just like Robin. Not Dick Grayson, Robin. So if she ever saw Dick Grayson, she would immediately pick him out as Robin. So
you'd think, wouldn't you?
But in that one, at the end, or at some point in it, Robin says, why would Catwoman want a kid working with her? And Batman says, maybe she's asking the same about me. And Robin says, well, that's different. And one other line I highlighted in my notes in the big birthday caper, Penguin and Riddler have gone to steal the Trojan horse replica. And Gordon says, great guns, you must stop them or I'll lose my job, my reputation, my pension.
Yes, yeah, sailed right over the kids' heads.
There was kind of a lot that would have sailed over the kids' heads. I was kind of surprised.
I think so. Sometimes it's so puerile that it lulls you into a, false sense of security that nothing interesting is going to happen. And then it really shocks you. Speaking of Commissioner Gordon, I thought this is one more item to rack up under the resemblances to the 66 show. I thought that Ted Knight was consciously trying to do Neil Hamilton's voice. There's something about the tempo and the cant of his voice, the rhythm of it, that struck me as very, very much like Neil Hamilton and not like Ted Knight's usual speaking voice. So, and he disguises his voice fairly well, too. I did not immediately recognize that was Ted Knight until maybe halfway through the series.
Yeah, Knight was better at disguising his identity, his voice, than Casey. Casey just... maybe it's just all those years of listening to American Top 40, but I can't not recognize Casey's voice.
Well, I think Casey tries really hard, at least a few times, especially with the kind of the gruff villains or the gruff goons, the henchmen. He makes his voice a lot lower and it sounds deeper, but then you get to the end of a sentence and somehow that inflection or whatever it is gives it away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need to get some kind of a speech therapist, speech expert to tell us why Casey's always so identifiable, no matter what voice he's doing.
Well, Denise, here's your long-distance dedication.
Okay. Well, that's all I had to say about it.
Well, just one last question. Was it worth it to you to look at this against the 66 show?
Yeah, I think so. It was interesting to me because I just at first look, it didn't seem like it had anything to do with the 66 show. But if you kind of pay attention to the details, you notice like all these phrases that were originated from the 66 show and similar plot points. And yeah, like I said, Mr. Freeze is Mr. Freeze and not Mr. Zero, and so on. So yeah, it was interesting from that point of view. And also just because I thought the writing was enjoyable in places.
Yeah, I feel the same way on both counts. And one other thing to say is just that, as another way of putting it, is that the paratext that gets you into this, that is what you need to understand this cartoon, is much more, biased toward the 66 show than it is toward the comics, I think. As your kind of skeleton key to understanding some of the jokes and the relationships and all is very much the show and not so much the comic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say so. After we recorded, Paul messaged me the following. 2 things about Adventures of Batman that I forgot to mention this morning. 1. Mike Ploog, the co-creator of Ghost Rider and first artist to draw Werewolf by Night for Marvel, is listed as a layout animator in the credits. Ploog has described that job as lying between storyboarding and animation. A layout artist draws backgrounds and figures out where the characters should be placed against them. At one point, maybe 3 episodes in, Robin calls Batman Chum, as if this were a reciprocal nickname between them, which it most certainly is not. Not in Batman 66 anyway. So, faced with curiosity that just wouldn't go away, I watched episode 1 of the 77 Filmation Batman this morning. Yes, it's got the swooping bat transitions all right, and it's also got the same stock footage of Robin throwing the Batarang, Batman hunched over the steering wheel of the Batmobile, and a whole lot of other familiar stock stuff from the first animated series. Holy recycling. Coming up, our Bat audio feature and the message board on 1988 Batmania.
Hello, I'm Ken Holtzhauser, and if you're looking for something new in comic books, may I recommend my newest comic, The Quick and the Dad, a love letter to the DC, Marvel, Archie, and Harvey comics of my youth. This comic has everything. It has spaceships, dad jokes, alien invasions, time travel, supervillains, and so many bad puns. Hopefully you'll like it. It's the cutest comic you've never heard of, and it's available today in print and digital from indieplanet.com. That's The Quick and the Dad. Join that other dynamic duo, won't you?
Join us on Patreon to support the show and get bonus content. For just $2 a month, you get access to outtakes from every To the Bat Polls episode, trivia quiz videos on 20th Century Entertainment, and the right to vote on future Bat Polls topics. For a $4 monthly donation, you also get the right to have an ad for your own project on the show once a month, and hours of exclusive podcasts. Get all the details at patreon.com/deconcomics and select the level of your monthly donation. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support. Now, the conclusion of the Batman reunion on CBS This Morning on June 14, 1989, in which Adam West talks about the show's renewed popularity in the UK, which coincidentally is also going to come up in the Bat Inbox.
They ran Batman reruns in England when there was a strike a year or so ago, and it seems like Batman is out of the country has had this incredible resurgence in popularity. You still hear from fans?
Yes, a lot. I think the reason for that is that they made the series accessible. I went over 5 times in the last year to co-host their counterpart of this show in London. And I think it was because of the time in which they presented Batman, because the whole family could watch, along with the hard news and so on.
Adam West, Julie Newmar, Cesar Romero, Burgess Meredith, thank you all for
joining
us. That's it. Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bat Inbox. So in our previous episode, we talked about Will Schreiner's Bat reunion, and I had asked on the all-seeing, all-knowing 66 Batman message board why there seemed to be so much attention to Batman in the public consciousness in 1988, a year before the first Tim Burton Batman movie. And we got responses, but they didn't come in until after we'd recorded the episode. So I thought we would get to them here. So,
okay.
Paul.
So Batwinged Hornet writes, I cannot confirm the following, but it appears Fox sensed the pre-release hype surrounding the production of the 89 Batman film, and at the time, I believe Fox had redistributed the 66 series and movie with cleaner prints to exploit the interest. Since Schaefer's show was a Fox property, it seemed like a no-brainer to stage a 66 reunion right at the same time the TV series was back on air for mutual promotion and to ride the aforementioned hype about Burton's film being in production. That's a really good point.
And then Batmite Returns says, the host's homemade bat shirt and cape are also entirely black, talking about Will Schreiner. I don't think we knew a year out that the suit that Michael Keaton would wear would also be black. No, I guess not.
And Mark Rakop writes, our Bat buddy Nate Truman of Hollywood Star Car fame put together the Will Schreiner show. It was shot before the Ross Schaefer show, but aired after it. Nate was disappointed, to say the least. That's interesting. Thanks for sending that along, Mark.
Then Lou Zabo says, after they announced Michael Keaton was playing Batman, there was some backlash. So they rushed a preview where he says, I'm Batman, while holding the robber over the ledge. That settled it. This was in 1988. He says, no later than Christmas, but might have been as early as June. But then he includes a social media post, a screenshot of it, which says specifically it was December of 88 that this clip came out. And he includes the YouTube video of that trailer, too, which had no music because it was rushed to theaters.
I remember that teaser trailer so well, expecting music, and it really did feel, in retrospect anyway, like it was slapped together, but it was really interesting. I mean, it really grabbed everybody's imagination in the theater where I saw it. But I think it might have actually been earlier. I'm not so sure that December, even though it's in this history of the Batman, we don't have any idea really what the provenance of this post is. But I do think it might have been as early as the summer before. But again, that's just, that's just memory. It doesn't have anything to do with, real time. So I could be very wrong.
Well, in the scanned article that's included at the end by Scott Sebring, it mentions that production started in October. So there wouldn't have been anything to release in June.
Fair enough.
So let's see. Batmite Returns comes in again. He says the teaser for the movie was not released in theaters until January 1989, a full 6 months before the movie came out.
Then Scott Sebring writes, hey, Scott, the buzz around Batman around this time wasn't just spurred on by the 89 movie. The movie was a reaction to the growing popularity of the character in the comics and seeping further into the pop culture of the day. Frank Miller's 1986 four-part The Dark Knight Returns injected a new interest in the character along with the 1987 Year One. Joel Eisner's 1966 Batman fan book came out in 1986, right around the earlier rumblings of the latest wave of Batmania. That's a useful benchmark. I dug up my copy of the fan book Batmania, released in 1989. It contains a great section called Revival and interviews Hal Lifson, who was instrumental in staging the legendary reunion event on March 9th, 1988 at the Stock Exchange nightclub in downtown L.A. He then helped put together the Will Schreiner and the Ross Schaefer reunions as well. Batman 1989 hadn't even started filming yet. Anyway, he included scans from that section of the book, which was really kind of you, Scott. And he says great stuff in there about the time of Bat reunions and one of the guys behind it. Now, I'm just going to state that, when I thought initially about why Batman, would have been, back in the public eye and why 66 reunions might have been on people's minds, I thought about The Dark Knight, but then, I realized that, what comics fans think about a character doesn't necessarily translate into what everyone else thinks. It's still a fairly small audience. For we were all thrilled by The Dark Knight Returns and sometimes angered by it, but nobody had no opinion of it. It really got everybody's attention in the world of comics and superheroes specifically. But then I realized, and I'm sure Scott can corroborate this too, that around that time, somewhere around 88 or so, after Watchmen and Dark Knight had both hit not only the single issue, like newsstands and direct sales outlets, but also had become paperbacks that were being sold by Warner in bookstores like Walden Books, that there was a Harlan Ellison article in Playboy. There were other articles like in Time Magazine and elsewhere, so it wasn't just the comics fans were paying attention to it. The media were paying attention to it as well as a phenomenon, and thereby spreading the phenomenon, I think, even further, getting people's attention. They might decide to go to Walden Books and pick up a copy of Watchmen or of The Dark Knight Returns. So there was, some news media participation in kind of pumping up the reputation of The Dark Knight Returns. And that certainly, I think, did something to fuel the revival fire, and also definitely to fuel to allow Warner's to greenlight the Batman movie. Make it feel like it was going to be worth their while.
Yeah. So, this article, the interview with Hal Lifson, by
Might
Hal
be
Lifson, as told to James Van Hise. Hise, Hise. So I'll link to this page on the message board and with the scans on it. You can take a look at it, everybody.
Well, I'm just seeing an interesting tidbit here. The Batman television series became a huge hit in England as a result of the cameraman strike at the BBC.
Yeah.
That's interesting in itself.
But apparently, Alien Sex Fiend putting out the Batman theme in 1988 was just a coincidence. Didn't have anything to do with Hal Lifson. So, in the course of doing this podcast, we've done episodes on memoirs by Adam West, Burt Ward, and Alan Napier, and we've researched up episodes on Madge Blake and Neil Hamilton. Who does that leave of the Batman regulars? Saints preserve us. We haven't yet talked about Stafford Rep, so that's our plan for next time. And
we're going to pump up Stafford Rep's rep.
And also, next episode, we have a big announcement, but you'll have to wait to find out what that is. So
somebody get the drum roll rolling, and in 2 weeks or a month, you'll be able to stop, and then we'll release the episode. Sorry, just kidding.
So we'll see you, I guess, in 4 weeks at the same Bat RSS feed. Check the show notes for links to the dynamic duo version of the theme and to the message board discussion about 1988 Batmania. Comment on our discussion in the thread for this episode at 66batman.com or through X at DconComics. You can drop us a line or send a donation through PayPal at batpoles@deconstructingcomics.com. You can also listen and comment via the Deconstructing Comics channel on YouTube or at our own site, tothebatpoles.libsyn.com. Support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics. Next time, our research into the life of Stafford Rep, our very own Chief O'Hara, Bagora. See you in 4 weeks.
At this very moment, in Central Headquarters, Commissioner Gordon's daughter, Barbara, who is secretly Batgirl, witnesses a grim conference.
Gosh, Batman,
With all my goofs, I've even become a menace to you.
Perhaps, Boy Wonder, you're overworked. Maybe you need a little vacation from crime fighting.
Attention, Commissioner Gordon. Joker reported in vicinity of Gotham Clock Factory.
Guess I'll have to go this one alone, old sport. Sorry.
I understand, Batman.
Bye, Dad. Gotta rush. Exit Robin. Enter Batgirl.
To the Bat Polls is a production of deconstructingcomics.com.